Freitas. The Freitas in 59 point will wait for it. 59.15 for Carlos de Freitas.
Hey, Autumn Athletes, Larry Sorensen here, and today I am going to speak with Carlos de Freitas and find out what makes him an Autumn Athlete that's not done yet. Before we get started, remember, if you enjoy our content, please like, subscribe, and ding that bell for notifications. All right, let's begin. Carlos, thanks so much for joining us today. Why don't you begin with a brief introduction of yourself?
So I'm Carlos de Freitas. I'm 53 years old. So I was born in Brazil. I've been living here in Cincinnati with my family, Karina and my two boys, Olav and Heitor, for 7.5 years now. Been an athlete for probably most of my life. So really enjoy what I do. I work in a company, a technology company. I manage global contracts, which gives me like a lot of freedom to kind of be flexible with my time, and which kind of comes quite handy when it comes to sports.
Well, Carlos, thanks so much for joining us today. We look forward to hearing more about what makes you an Autumn Athlete that's not done yet. Before we talk about what you're doing these days as a Masters athlete, let's get a little history. Why don't you take us back and fill us in on your athletic history?
All right. So I started doing sports when I was quite young. So I happened to go to a school system where we have this amazing sport facility right next to it. So most of my PE teachers, they were also like coaches. So either for volleyball, basketball, a lot of track and field. So I ended up like quite early on, 9th grade or 10th grade, that people kind of saw me playing tag and say, "Hey, that guy's fast. So let's get him on our team," right? So one thing led to another. So I ended up doing cross country, track and field, basketball. Obviously, growing up in Brazil, a lot of soccer, and so it was a quite interesting way of getting initiated with a lot of different sports, right?
Did you participate in any sports like in college, any organized sports?
Well, funny enough, starting so early with the 10, 11 years old, so I ended up getting quite active between 13 and 19. And I ended up picking a college that did not have a track and field team. So I would say for many years I was part of the Brazilian team or the state team, but I never ended up running while I was in college. So I ended up switching sports and start doing other things, but I never run in college.
So did you have any kind of a gap in your athletics, whether it was track and field or anything else, where a lot of Autumn athletes, they kind of stopped doing things in their late 20s, life happened and so forth, and then all of a sudden they got back later? Or have you been doing it all the way through?
Well, I did. It was by the time I was kind of getting, I would say, burned out a little bit with training track and field for so much. When I got to 19, 20, I switched it to handball and started playing handball for a little while. So did it semi-professionally for 2.5 years, right? Then it stopped completely for many reasons. I started feeling some pain in my knee. Work caught up with me, so it was kind of getting difficult. Kind of early years of you kind of building your career life. So I pretty much went away, and for 10, 15 years did not do anything except playing squash, eventually, or tennis. But then it took me 20 plus years to get back to track and field. So it was a quite interesting journey.
So at what age were you when you officially got back into Masters?
It was right at the beginning of the pandemic. So it was when I was 50. I was turning 50. Just went playing tennis at some place that was the only sport you could actually do some sort of I would say social distancing, right? So I saw the track and field. I'm like, oh, you know what? I remember that, right? Did some warm up, caught up with a coach of mine and asked her, "Hey, listen, there's a track and field here." So she said, "Okay, Carlos, why don't you do this? Do a couple of tests, send me the results," right? Well, here I was 2 weeks later. It's what do you think? She's like, "Dude, if you just put in a little bit of work, you're right, top 20, let me tell you." And I was like, whoa. And she's like, "You're in the US. I mean, the abundance of opportunities for master athletes, it's incredible. So you should take advantage of it." So that was a quite interesting discovery for me.
Okay.
It hurt a lot because in the beginning, obviously you overdo it. There's a lot of things that you don't take into consideration. You might lead to some injuries. So I had to kind of reevaluate my choices a little bit after 6 or 7 months. But the first year was incredibly crazy and prolific.
So have you had any actually injuries, or any big ones maybe in the past or during this Masters track and field?
Well, I always nurtured this sort of a lower back injury from my early years of jumping. So I was a long jumper and triple jumper. So at one point I kind of really screwed something up on my lower back. So I had to kind of put a cast and did a lot of rehab. So it went away. On my way back, obviously you start pushing yourself and feeling that. So I think it was like a combination of poor choices in terms of I don't want to spend too much money. I don't know if this is going to be like a real thing. So you buy the cheapest tennis shoes, right? Stupid. So I start feeling my Achilles hurting a little bit, and then my lower back because of all the impact. But then I kind of realized what was going on. Put a cast on my had a boot for on my left foot for probably 20 days, 25 days. Then kind of I had to treat it with shockwave, that kind of thing. But that was the only thing that actually happened, which is, I mean, all things considered, I think I'm quite lucky with not having to deal with any injuries or anything.
All right, we're going to delve into track and field a little more specifically shortly, but I know you've played some squash and you do a little bit of climbing. So fill us in on those activities. And are you still doing those things, or is that just something you did in the past?
Rock climbing was like a great passion for me. So I started doing it when I was 25, did it for like 15 plus years, a lot of indoors, outdoors. I was still living in Brazil, so there was like plenty of different places to go. That's a very vibrant community, right? So as I wasn't doing any sport, but in order for you to get to the walls, it was like a lot of tracking. So that kind of like reconnect me with a lot of that aspect of having to put a lot of stress on tracking, that kind of thing. So I still do eventually indoor. I haven't done outdoor in quite some time, just kind of getting back to it. Squash, I start playing 15 years back. Ended up moving to a place where they have like this condo squash court, doing some yoga, and people say, "Hey, this is a squash court." I'm like, "Oh, didn't know it." So start playing, and I realized that it was just the perfect sport for people that are like kind of a quick decisions, is quite active. It's a really interesting one. So when I moved to Cincinnati, ended up like hooking up with a bunch of people here that play. It's a very, very big scene of squash here. So I ended up like playing competitively for Cincinnati for probably 4 or 5 years now. So I keep playing. Won a tournament earlier this year. Was a runner-up on another one. So I'm always like thinking of and I still do it as a think of as a CrossFit exercise to kind of complement track and field. So it's like quite fun. You don't have to kind of really do a lot of effort on that.
So just briefly to educate us non-squash players, do you play doubles, singles, both?
I play more of a single, so every now and then I play doubles, but usually for doubles you require like this kind of a larger court, so we don't have many courts in town, but it's always like a quite and also the age gap between people that usually play doubles, it's quite competitive, but as you get older and older, playing doubles is better for you because you don't have to cover that much space. You have like someone to help you out. So when we we tend to be a bit more focused on the singles.
It's time for you to brag a little bit here. Just tell us about all your personal best achievements.
All right. So as soon as I came back, I guess I was a hurdler when I was young. So that was one of the things that when I did the whole test, as I mentioned in the beginning, my coach said, listen, at your age, one thing you're not going to know for sure, not many people do hurdles. So it's something that you require a lot of hip mobility. As you get older, it gets very difficult. You have the flexibility topic, and 400-meter hurdles, long hurdles, it's even worse. Like who wants to do that, right? I've always been like one of my passions doing long hurdles. So when I saw the Brazilian record first, I'm like, okay, I think I can do this in 60 seconds, right? So there was the record back then, it was 60.1. So I said, okay. So first time I tried, I got maybe do 62. Then the first year I kept like trying. So in the very first year, 5 or 6 months in, as I was back, I was able to break it. So I was like, wow, that's great. So as I kept doing, I realized I had broken the short hurdles as well as part of it. So in the first year was like this incredible discovery, like, oh, I'm not only very competitive, I'm already breaking records. Like that was like the Brazilian record. So for subsequent years, that was on nationals in Ames, national outdoors. So when I did the USATF National Outdoors the year after, and the next 2 years, I ended up like improving that record a little bit. So I kind of break my own record a couple of times. It's now down to 59.15 on the 400-meter hurdles, which is pretty good. And in the 50s, that's my age group, by the way, 50 to 54. So on the short hurdles, it's 14.88 right now. And just last year, I discovered that I could 3-step because I was 4-stepping the short, right? So yeah, so it means that from now on, I have the possibility of actually getting better. I ended up like breaking a few other records in the indoors, but when you think about South American, we don't have much of a very strong indoor season. So usually the records tend to be kind of I would say, not very complicated.
Okay, so you've had successes here in track and field. We kind of want to know how you do that. So why don't you fill us in on your current training regimen, what you do, on the track, off the track, cross training, weight room, maybe in season, off season. Just fill us in on how we can become great 400-meter hurdlers.
All right, so I'll try to be as concise as I can, right? Because I mean, you can cut in so many different ways when you talk about training. So as I mentioned earlier, I hooked up with this friend of mine, so we used to train together. So she kind of she looked at my results and she said, okay, listen, so let me tell you, you tell me what's your overall fitness level right now, and we're going to start like with some adaptation over the next few months. So first 6 months, we're pretty much like trying to look at how much stamina I still have, what's your explosiveness in terms of a sprint, how much speed endurance you still have. But so at the end of I would say for 5 or 6 months, we ended up like setting up on track work 3 times a week, strength training, gym twice a week, and sometimes over the weekend, if I had time, I would do like 5Ks, 10Ks, or do like a lot of hill sprints, just to kind of complement that. And I never stopped playing squash. And so I would eventually like replace a little bit of the training when I things were like, I don't know, quite hectic. I would say, okay, so tonight I'm not going to do strength training. I'm going to do just squash, right? So when it comes to track, it depends on what type of the season. So if it is off season for me, that's a lot of repetition, a lot of mileage. So it's like, I don't know, 6 to 8 reps of 400 meters. Then on a specific day, just like hurdles, drills, or like, I don't know, high intense training, followed by jumps, lots of jumps. So and that kind of combines a little bit of my triple jump and the hurdles, it helps a lot. If it is specific to in season, then there's a lot of sprint work, block starts, drills with the hurdles. Then you switch it up and do 150s, 200s, 300s, do a lot of ladders. Or people don't like me because of that, but when you do like 400, 800, you have to do a lot of like long runs to kind of stimulate your lactic, I would say, build up and being able to actually put up with. So one of the ones that I hate a lot is like doing reps of 1,000 meters or doing reps of 600s, because you're gonna suffer, and it's like it's a given. You're gonna have to do it. The way my coach kind of works with me, she's like, listen, I'm always gonna give you like this sort of menu. You can pick and choose. You tell me which days you want to suffer. You can move stuff around as long as you know that there's 1 or 2 days of the week where you have to just like snap out of your fears and make sure that specific day is going to be either a long day, it's going to be like a lot of suffering in terms of repetition. So which is a funny thing when you as I mentioned before, I work a lot from home, so being able to kind of be flex with your time, and having a family with my 2 boys being 12 and 15. So there's a lot of stuff that you expect, your family expect to see you, right? Like, well, where did you go? You're gone for like 2 hours. I say, I'm just going to run a little bit. And they're like, oh, Dad, that's going to be like 2 hours. I say, no, it's a short sprint, No, it's always like, it requires at least like 60 to 90 minutes if you do it, I would say, quick. And I'm quite, I would say, disciplined to do. I do more warm up. I do a lot of stretching before and after. So that's why I think you don't get injured. You keep observing how your body reacts to it, right? So and cross training, as I mentioned, I mean, depending on what type of the season, or if you're like peak of the season, I try to cut back on the amount of cross training that I do, or gym training. I do a lot of plyometrics. That kind of changed my game last year. That's when I actually got faster, to my surprise, revamped the whole thing, do a lot of plyometrics. I still do it. So I would say, compared to most of the sprinters that do what I do, they tend to lift and do a lot more with weightlifting. I do probably 20 to 30% of it. So I don't think I've ever liked it. I know it is like a necessary evil, but I rather like replace with a few other things that kind of give me a bit more pleasure doing it.
Fill us in on your approach to diet and nutrition. And then I also kind of tag on rest to that as well. How do you fit rest into the life?
I love the question. This is something that people tend to overlook all the time, right? So it doesn't matter how how fit you are, how quick, or how many years you have of training. The reality is, as you age, you got to make sure that, one, you understand how your body reacts to everything you do, right? So I use a lot of like different wearables to kind of track, am I doing well, am I recovering enough? But at the end of the day, it's like you have that gut feeling, like when you're feeling tired, you're probably very tired. So you got to listen to that thing, right? So I try to sleep at least like 7 to 8 hours a night whenever I can. I try not to eat anything processed if I can. So from a dietary point of view, I'm quite lucky. My wife, she's an amazing cook. And I grew up like eating quite well. So I don't have like any qualms with the, oh, I don't like this, I don't like that. My upbringing was like, listen, you eat what we have, and it's everything very healthy, and that's good for you. So I'm not very big on meat or protein. I've always tried kind of listen to, hey, maybe I need to ingest a little bit more, but I have like this very well balanced diet. I eat a lot, probably 3, 4, 5 times a day. Especially working from home, it's like a kind of small meals here. Sometimes I eat breakfast twice. What I think it is distinctive, I eat a lot of bread. Oh my God. I mean, the carbohydrates. I mean, if you think, I mean, people say, Carlos, what's your diet? I say, well, don't take my example as something you would follow. It works for me. I think it runs in the family. I have good genetics in terms of not putting up weight. In fact, for me, if I don't practice, if I don't train, I ended up like losing weight. So I have to actually complement with a lot of food, but eat a lot of fruit, a lot of vegetables. So I try to, as I said, I try to avoid fast food as much as I can. It's impossible, but I mean, if I can live without, I do. I love sodas and pops and that kind of thing, which for me is the most difficult thing to do, is not to drink them, because I like the sugar. So what I do every now and then is if there's like a big competition coming up, I'm like, okay, for the next 4 months, I'm not going to drink that specific thing. Like Doritos, for example, the Mexican drink. Like I'm like, okay, I'm not gonna drink that. I'm gonna have a few on my fridge. I'm gonna look at them every day. So as I'm done, as I hit my targets, then when I'm back, I'm gonna indulge, right? So, but besides that, I think some things that people sometimes they tend to lose the perspective as well. It's like, it's not only recovery; it is your mental balance. It's where are you in terms of finding time for you things you like and for the things you're trying to accomplish. And it has to do with your work, with your family, with the things you ingest, what your expectations are. Sometimes you kind of get into crazy games in terms of, I want to do this, and you want it so badly that you tend to kind of overlook some other important aspects of maybe you're getting sick so repeatedly because you're not eating correctly, or you're overdoing, or you're always like feeling you can never get to that. I call like the I would say this spiral of oh, I'm getting good, but then I overdo it, I get injured, and then it takes longer to recover. And then when I'm good again, even before it's fully healed, I'll get to it, and then next thing you know, you're again trying to recover for something. So I think as long as again, at our age, if you're able to listen to your body and understand that sometimes it pays off to rest a little bit more, so you can actually get more quality out of what you do. Mm-hmm. And my last bit would be, if you're putting up the time, do it well. Do it well. Don't do it like half baked. Don't try to do just cut corners. Yeah, I'm gonna do 10. Now, if you're gonna do 10, do 10. Do like, be there. Oh, don't. Oh no, I'm gonna rush to it. Whenever you rush, every time that I rush in the last 4 years, I did something stupid. So I can tell that the very few times that I tweaked my hamstring, that I felt like something on my lower back, it was because I was really trying to cut corners. That doesn't work.
What's the driver at 53 to keep pushing hard, setting these goals and trying to achieve them?
That's a fantastic take. And I was having the same conversation with a friend of mine the other day. He's a climber in Spain, and we were like joking, because he's been climbing for most of his life. And like, you know, have kids, why you keep risking yourself, right? Because I love climbing, but when I had my kids, I started like cutting back on it. I was like, well, it takes on a different meaning of you risking your life now that you have kids, you have a family, right? So for the sport, you keep thinking, I've always been very competitive, and there's that satisfaction of you looking around and say, oh my God, I'm not only able to do what I do, but in a very competitive manner. And obviously there's that sort of, as you mentioned about bragging, sometimes like a friend of mine calls me out of the blue and say, hey, Coach Carlos, because I'm an assistant coach to the junior high here. Like, Coach Carlos, we just realized you're a master athlete. Like, yeah. Well, we look up you in master athletes, and you were like top X. I'm like, yeah, and like, you should have told us. Like, listen, it's a thing that I like for me. I'm not competing. I'm not a sponsor, right? But when you stop to think about why I'm doing this right now, I keep looking ahead in terms of 5, 10, 20 years in the future. My dad used to play soccer. And when I was like quite young, I used to see him like doing all types of exercise, always in good shape. And I kept asking, why is he still running at the 30 plus 40 like, I mean, he has a life, and he comes off the work, and he's like running again. I'm like, this is crazy. But now it kind of down on me that when it gives you that great satisfaction when you invest on yourself. It's almost like, hey, you're creating something better for the future. And I keep thinking, I want to be there for my kids, my grandkids. I was a dad when I was 39. That my first son was born when I was 39. And I kept thinking, gosh, when he's 15, I'm going to be 50 plus. I want to be able to actually interact with him like sport-wise, right? And now that I see it, says, okay, so I think I'm going down the right path in terms of investing on that as something you would invest for your retirement. Same thing. I want to be able to travel the world of my life and with my wife, and being able to actually enjoy doing that without having to think about, oh my God, I'm limping because of X, Y, Z. And I know many people, I mean, because of X number of factors, right? But at my age, they are not mobile enough, and that kind of pains me to think that this is will be my future, right? So I don't want that for me.
If you could turn back time, is there anything you would have done a little differently in regards to your health and fitness?
It doesn't matter the country, in which country you were born and where you're upbringing. The competitiveness of it, trying to be top X and going to states, be part of your national team and being an Olympian, whatever, drives you to always do as much as you can, right? So I was always like, when I think from a very early age, as early as 12 something, I was practicing 6 times a week. So I did not have much of a social life. I was like always training. That was the pros and cons. On one hand, I always had like the freedom and the trust from my family that I could go wherever I wanted. I was always traveling for competitions, so I had like this amazing amount of people kind of playing with me. But on the other hand, I kept thinking that some of the bad judgments I made in terms of trying to rush things through, complaining about my coaches, and not really understanding I would say, and I used to hear that from my dad. He used to say, Carlos, when you were older, when you get more experience, you understand what this means. I'm like, oh, don't give me that crap, right? What are you saying? It's like, yes. But then you start realizing that some of the things, I guess back then, the coaches, they would not tell me, hey, you don't have to try this so hard, for example, lifting so hard because you might get hurt. And you kept like mirroring yourself on other people that were like ahead of yourself. And I was always trying to emulate some role models that maybe they were not the right one. But no one would tell you that. I mean, it was, again, growing up in Brazil, track and field was not like soccer, right? So you really have to be cream de la cream, or really top, in order for you to get anything that would help you continue to foster, to give like a full ride on college, or to actually get you some sponsorship. So I was always like trying to do as much as I could. Now looking back, I would maybe try to go slightly easier, try more sports, and being able to kind of test more different things. I ended up doing more later in life, but I guess I was so focused. It was so intense that at one point I was good at school, but I met many people that they were not. And now when I look back and I talk to some of them, they're like, oh my God, I should have invested more time on academics. So I think that's being able to have coaches and people that kind of help you put things into perspective when you're quite young. That's I would say a good thing.
So if you could bottle everything to help us be as successful as you are, what would that secret sauce ingredient or recipe be?
Again, I think it depends on the kind of a character you have, your personality. I've always been super disciplined on whatever I do, right? So if I'm going to do something, as I said, I'm going to do it for good. I would say the secret for me is like really being super honest of where I am, what I can accomplish, and having a plan to get there. So if I, for example, if I'm saying this year I want I want to break the whatever, the record as such and such. And I know what I have to do there. So very early on, I have a plan to get there. So everything for me in terms of accomplishments for school, job, family-wise, or my whole circle of network of friends, it revolves around, do we know where I am? Do I have self-awareness of what I'm going through? And because, I mean, most of the time you always have like expectations that things will work out, but you don't know why. I never bought into it. I'm like, listen, if I wanted something, what I'm gonna do to get to that point? So if I want a better job, so do I know what I need to get a promotion, to get a better job, to switch companies? So if I want to be a self-made man, and what kind of business I'm going to invest in? If I want to be good at sport, so how do I get there? So I always like invest a lot of time learning trade. So if I would say, my suggestion would be research. Like, I mean, at one point in the first, second year, I did not know exactly what I was doing to get good. Now I had a point where I can actually coach and say, I know exactly why I'm doing X, Y, Z exercises. So I think that, and it gives you that also that satisfaction of, I know what I'm doing, and I can help more people doing it. And just by doing so, you derive so much satisfaction of doing it. And I would say that's the second secret of kind of comes with the first one, which is know what you're doing, have the self-awareness, and also have fun. Because if you don't have fun, why you're doing it, right? I mean, you don't have anything to prove to anyone. So it's like, because if you don't enjoy it, chances are it's not going to last long. And then you're probably going to be like just hopping from thing to thing, and that kind of ruins your life.
Well, Carlos, thanks so much for joining us today and letting us know what makes you an autumn athlete that's not done yet. I'd like to wrap up today by giving you the floor to give us some final thoughts.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for inviting me, Larry. This is, I mean, when we met in Chicago, I was like, whoa, is this the guy that is doing that thing that I keep seeing in interviews? First of all, it's an amazing format. I love the way you kind of interview people, and the fact that people kind of come to you and talk and give their testimony of what is due, right? So my final thoughts are like, again, if you have a chance to get out there, do something. As I mentioned, like it could be 5 to 10 minutes of your day. Do it. You're going to get so much more out of it. Even if it is like meditation, do shavasana. I mean, just lay on the floor, do a little bit of yoga, walk, whatever you can. That like has an incredible impact on your life like you never imagined. So go for it.
Well, there you go, folks. Carlos de Freitas. He is definitely an autumn athlete that's not done yet. Remember, keep moving, set your own goals, and train hard to achieve them. Thanks so much for watching, and we will see you next time.
All right. Bye, Larry.